containing Colorado's fires. The most common measure we use to determine if we're winning doesn't really tell the story. I'll have a simple thing that we can do together in the next 30 minutes to support those firefighters and their families. The Broncos ask for permission to put fans in the stands. Let's look at how that can be done without people swapping droplets. The president offers his first public encouragement of the bizarre conspiracy theory that sucked in a congressional candidate in Colorado. A teacher asks a nervous next question about going back to school. And one student's smart idea to connect kids with support. That's next. Only one fire in Colorado history has burned more ground than the Pine Gulch fire that's currently going. It's claiming even more acres in a remote part of western Colorado. You'll hear newscasters say each night that it's still 7% contained. That's a measure that does not give us the best idea of what's really happening on Colorado's fire lines. Here's Anusha Roy.
The goal is to fight the Pine Gulch fire on firefighters' terms, not Mother Nature's.
For a long time last week, it was moving to the northeast. Now we're seeing extreme activity to the northwest.
To help, the Forest Service is flying infrared flights, usually at night, over the fire's perimeter to create a heat map and figure out what's burning and what's cooled down.
GIS file that then we use in the mapping to determine that perimeter and the number of acres contained within that perimeter.
Containment is an important benchmark, one that does not seem to be moving much at Pine Gulch.
The area that we are considering contained is growing. The fire is growing as well.
South Metro crews are on the front lines helping. The Brush Engine 41 crew sent in these pictures overnight from the Pine Gulch fire. But the agency also said how they figure out containment is different, since wildfires in South Metro's jurisdiction tend to be smaller.
It's pretty unscientific. Usually we're using an approach of just visually what does the fire look like and how much of a fire line have firefighters gotten around it.
And as a fire department that does a lot of work in the wildland urban interface, South Metro gives some important perspective.
The Chat Ridge 2 fire earlier this year in South Metro's district, we had roughly 60% of the fire contained, and that was before that rest of that 40% that wasn't contained made a very aggressive run through an uphill portion of a canyon, and wind pushed it right up towards the backcountry neighborhood, and that's where we ended up having homes threatened.
And what might be counterintuitive is that sometimes containment is not top priority.
We have grass, brush, trees, and homes are scattered throughout this area. If a fast-moving fire starts here, it's entirely possible that firefighters aren't going to be doing anything to contain a fire. They're working on life safety, meaning they're trying to get people out of here as fast as they can.
So figuring out containment in a remote area versus an urban area is going to look different. That makes sense, right? And to get a little bit more specific on that last point, according to the latest numbers, the Colorado State Forest Service is estimating around 2.9 million Coloradans are living in that wildland urban interface. So Kyle, that means all of those people could be facing some kind of wildfire risk.
Yep, and Anusha, once the fire ends up someplace near you, people just want to know what's the measure that's going to determine when I can go back home.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing a firefighter wants to do is tell people come back home and then say, never mind, you got to clear back out. So there's a bunch of things that they're looking at. That heat mapping we were telling you about, that's helping decide where it's safe to come back home or where to evacuate, both which have happened within the Pine Gulch fire in the last couple of days. Of course, what the firefighters are seeing on the ground, as well as the weather, it's all going to play a role in this, Kyle, so that they are as safe as possible with the communities close by.
Really appreciate that report. I think it kind of expanded our perspectives beyond getting hung up on this containment number. Anusha, thank you. There's a new fire that's burning in Garfield County this afternoon, this evening. It's near Carbondale. The fire department there says the Fisher Creek fire had already burned through 20 acres by the time they got out there at 4 p.m. Evacuation notices have gone out for the High Aspen residences, Coulter Ranch, and the Homestead Estates. This one looks to be trouble in terms of its speed and proximity to homes, so we're going to be keeping an eye out for new updates or any verified photos of that fire. The 4 major wildfires that are burning in Colorado have covered about 275 square miles combined between the Grizzly Creek Fire, the Cameron Peak Fire, the Williams Fork Fire, and the Pine Gulch Fire near DeBeck, which has burned 196 square miles alone. The minute that the state banned large gatherings due to COVID-19, a bunch of Coloradans were like, yeah, but Broncos games, right? Broncos games? And sure enough, the Broncos are asking the state's permission right now to put some fans inside Mile High this season. Our Steve Steger got a preview of what that might look like and considers how the pandemic might even change the way that we build sports stadiums.
The Broncos are getting set to submit a formal request to the state, one that would allow for some fans inside the stadium this season, but it will look nothing like the games we're used to. I'm told the capacity would be a fraction of what the stadium could hold. You might have to take a temperature check to get in. Everyone would have to wear a mask and keep distance. You couldn't pay cash at concession stands, and the bathrooms would be touchless. The Broncos say they would avoid anything that might create crowds, perhaps a hint that tailgating might be a no-no. Who gets in could be interesting too. In a stadium filled mostly with season ticket holders, the Broncos say only a quarter of them have requested refunds for the season, meaning that 75% of others are holding out hope.
Well, a lot of things are going to change.
This pandemic might just change the way stadiums like Mile High are built in the future. Dan Eisenman is a stadium architect with the firm Stantec in the Boulder office. He says the stadiums of the future and the current ones will all include fewer touch points for fans.
Grab and go cashless interactions are going to be more important.
And he says outdoor spaces will be even more important than ever. So people waiting in line, or the queue if you want to get fancy, can space out instead of smushing in.
I think the spaces outside need to take into consideration the social distance queuing in all directions, right? When we look at a queue, say Disneyland, it's just a maze and it's closed by. The reality is that you need to keep a perimeter around you.
Here's some good news. He also says the stadiums of the future are going to have more bathrooms. In fact, he's building the New York Islanders' new arena in New York and says it will have the most bathrooms of any sports stadium around. Now, again, the state health department has to approve the Broncos' plans here if they are to allow fans inside the stadium. The Rockies did not respond to my request on how their variance request is going with the state of Colorado, but the state says they're going to keep an eye on science and keep an eye on all this when they take those variance requests into consideration.
So much about the pandemic restrictions have been shifting numbers and restrictions. Is this the kind of thing where, like, the Broncos are going to get an attendance capacity number for Mile High at the start of the season? That's what they have to do through the whole season? Or will it be more like my daughter, where she asks for one cookie, she gets one, she asks for 2 cookies, and then 3, and then 4?
So the way I understand it, they will be granted the capacity right away, but the Broncos tell me that they're not going to go and give away enough tickets to fill that full capacity that they're allowed right away. They want to do this in a measured approach if they're allowed to do it, by letting a certain amount of people in one week, see how it goes, then maybe let some more in the following week, and then see how that goes, and just keep building up and up and up.
Got it. Quarter cookie, half cookie, full cookie, onto more cookies. Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Hey, great news. Our state's COVID-19 numbers are holding steady, and they are decreasing for the most part. 151 people are currently in Colorado's hospitals with COVID-19 right now. 17 have gone home or gone to another location in the last day. Hospitalizations peaked in April and May, and then again there was the smaller peak in July, and they've been dropping since. Our testing rate has dropped off compared to what we've seen in recent weeks, and that's why we focus so much on the positivity rate, because that'll shoot up if we are not testing enough to keep a handle on the virus's spread in the community. And the 7-day moving average for positivity is still at an excellent 2.84%. You can help select the woman who is going to run RTD. If you have thoughts about the way our transit system runs, and our feedback on this program suggests that you do have said thoughts, well, then here's the deal. The 3 finalists, Deborah Johnson, Adelie LeGrand, and Tina Kegel, have put together videos outlining their vision for how the metro area should get around. You're asked to take a look at those videos and those visions, have a link on 9news.com, and then provide RTD with your personal feedback before they decide on a new leader early next week. Whichever woman takes over, she is going to have some work to do. $166 million pandemic-fueled budget shortfall, promised projects that are years behind, and a consistently difficult time hiring and keeping drivers and train operators. We have the chance to do something really important with this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign. We can tell those wildland firefighters working to save lives and property in our state that we have their back. The word of thanks that comes to mind when I think about the Wildland Firefighters Foundation is defenders. When one of Colorado's defenders gets injured fighting a wildfire, that's the nonprofit that steps up to support that firefighter and their family. They do that for wildland firefighters throughout the Mountain West because teams based in Colorado often travel to other states to work, and firefighters from other states are in Colorado defending us now. People like photographer and firefighter Kyle Miller of Wyoming, who's taken these photos of the Pine Gulch fire. The Wildland Firefighters Foundation was created after the Storm King fire that killed 14 firefighters in Colorado in 1994. When a wildland firefighter dies in the line of duty, this is the nonprofit that makes sure that their family can get by before the benefits arrive. This is a well-respected nonprofit that was vouched for by the fire managers in Colorado. Let's send a strong message that Colorado appreciates these wildland firefighters, the risks that they take, and the families that they leave for long stretches so they can protect our state and others. If you text the word thanks to 303-871-1491, I'll send you the link to donate. You can find it wherever you find Next on social media. As always, I will match the first 50 $5 donations from Next viewers. The bottom line is this: it's easy to feel powerless when the smoke is filling Colorado skies. Here's a chance to do something for those firefighters and their families together. Thank you. A concerned teacher has our next question about schools and masks. A high school freshman is getting into the matchmaking business, connecting tutors with students who need help. Some fresh thinking to solve a real issue at this time. Next. President Trump today praised QAnon supporters in his first public comments on that conspiracy theory. QAnon's been described by the FBI as a potential domestic terror threat, and it's found support from several candidates for Congress, including Republican Lauren Boebert, who's running to represent Western and Southern Colorado. President Trump today mentioned QAnon followers' devotion to him personally, and when asked specifically about that cult that believes that he is fighting a secret war against Democratic cannibals and pedophiles, the president said, quote, "If I can help save the world from problems, I'm willing to do it." And he later said, quote, "And we are, actually. We're saving the world from a radical left philosophy." We've reported on the woman in Colorado who's facing child kidnapping charges, accused of planning an armed raid with fellow QAnon believers to take her son out of foster care. Today, Facebook banned about 2,000 groups pushing the QAnon conspiracy theory, accusing them of promoting violence and leading to crime. Our next question comes from a teacher worried about going back to class in rural northeast Colorado. We're not using her name so we don't endanger her job. Our boards determined that masks are not required for staff or students. Is this allowed with the mandate? If it's not, is there someone to report it to? So we reached out to Democratic Governor Jared Polis's office, since that statewide mask mandate is his executive order. Anybody 11 years old and up is required to wear a face mask in indoor public spaces, schools included. Masks are required during in-person instruction, including when students are at their desk. The exception is if there's, quote, a medical intolerance, disability, or education reason for not wearing a mask. This would not apply to younger grades. The order is for ages 11 and up. State recommends contacting your local health department if you have any concerns or reports to make, like a school or a business that you don't think is following health directives. A high school freshman comes up with a modern tutoring solution inspired by old school.
It's modeled after the one-room schoolhouses from years ago.
That's next. The pandemic is fertile ground for divergent thinkers, if we're looking at this positively. Those people who are willing to reimagine how to get done what needs getting done, but just not in the same way. Like the high school freshman who's offering her take on online tutoring. Our Brian Wendland grabbed his camera and caught up with her.
School is going to be different this year, but the need for help outside of class won't change.
If you can't get that help, then it would probably be a really stressful situation just because you can't get the help that you need.
Jerry Bailey is a freshman at Cherry Creek High, and she started OneRoom.School so that any kid who needs that extra help can get it for free.
It's modeled after the one-room schoolhouses from years ago, where the 12th graders will help the 11th graders, will help the 10th graders, so on, while the teacher helps one group.
Elementary school kids all the way up to high schoolers can sign up for help. 7th graders and up can sign up to be tutors.
So it's essentially just students helping other students.
Tutors and students are verified with their in-person teachers to make sure they're good fits for the program.
So we're just making sure that everything's safe and it's going to be an easy process for everyone involved.
Bailey says she's not worried about adding too much to her plate as a first-year high school student.
I'm taking a lot of more difficult classes than I have before, and so far the homework I've done has been really fun and it's been super engaging and I enjoyed it.
In fact, she's already dreaming about how far this free tutoring can go.
One day, if we get big enough, then our website's going to have a list of tutors that will be live. If we get big enough, we might always have a live tutor.
For Next, I'm Brian Wendland.
Great idea. Free website reaches beyond Colorado. Tutors and students can sign up from anywhere. Bailey already has a tutor who signed up in Canada. We're going to have a final word about what we're doing together tonight to help the firefighters hard at work across our state. That and your feedback next. There are wildland firefighters from across the Mountain West working long hours doing dangerous work to protect lives and property in Colorado this week. Our Word of Thanks microgiving project this week supports the premier nonprofit that supports them and their families should they be injured or killed in the line of work. If you text the word thanks to 303-871-1491, we'll send you the link to donate to the Wildland Firefighters Foundation. I understand some people have been trying to call the number. You have to text it in order to get the link. You can also find it on all of our social media pages. I always ask you to consider giving $5, and I always match the first 50 of those $5 donations. This is our chance to tell those firefighters and their families that we've got their back, just like they have ours. Michael writes in tonight, only brave and tough men and women can be firefighters. I can't think of a better organization this week to donate to with all the fires in Colorado and in California. Let's break every money-raising record since you've started these weekly campaigns. Well, Michael, that is a lofty goal indeed. Next viewers have generously donated $377,000 since June in these weekly campaigns. I still think our all-time record is the $90,000 raised to clean up Civic Center Park after it was defaced during the protests. That was an astronomical sum. We'll see what we can do for the firefighters this week. Tom wants to know why we can't use the National Guard to help fight fires. It's a great question. Let's see if we can get that answered for you by the end of this week. See you next time.